hello, my name is Krzysztof Zielinsky, and today I have a great pleasure and honor to conduct a very unique interview on behalf of Mały Leksykon Wielkich Zespołów, as today I'll be talking to Gerard Hynes, therefore the member, the lyricist, and the voice of UlySseS, the legendary German-Australian progressive rock band, as well as the member of UlySseS Resurrection project. And thank you very much for this opportunity and willingness to discuss the most renowned album, Neronia, with you and go down, deep down into the lyrics.
Yeah, I'm ready. I've listened. I went back and I listened to the song several times, so I'm ready. I feel.
Nice. And to begin with, I would like to express that the album, to me, feels like a conceptual exploration of the shadows and trials of youth. It captures those troublesome experiences of childhood and adolescence that echo throughout our lives, and you seem to examine them under so many different angles. And the album starts with Vagabond Child, with its dark, heart-gripping lyrics about estrangement, teenage drug use, homelessness, and death, and experiencing the life for yourself, and feeling what it really is when it kicks you in the teeth. And were there any specific episodes in life that both inspired you and influenced the song? What is the story behind this song?
Yeah. Well, I mean, at that particular point in time, I was living in Offenbach, and we had the rehearsal studio in Frankfurt. It was in a bunker, in a World War II bunker. So me coming from Australia, this was bizarre that I was, living in this German city, and the band was rehearsing in a bunker. And my girlfriend at the time was a Lufthansa stewardess, so she was away for long periods of time. And what I would do is I had a Walkman, and I would tape the songs, and these were very, very long songs, and I would walk around with them for weeks, with the Walkman, listening to the music, trying to be inspired. And with Teenage Sweethearts, it was real. It was something that had happened to me. Um, and when I heard the violins and when I heard the song, it was already basically written, the music at least. And I heard the violins, and I heard, the structure of the song, and I just thought it was really melodramatic. And I thought, what's the most melodramatic thing I could kind of examine? And it was a strange love triangle that I'd experienced when I was a teenager, and it all came out. And I looked at it in many, many different ways over a long period of time, and weeks. And there was always the pressure that the song would be written, because the guys in the band wanted a complete song, but it just took me forever to do. And but I did it, and it was 11 minutes, that song, Teenage Sweethearts. And I went back to something that I thought was melodramatic in my life, which was this situation where I was involved with two different girls, and that's what the song's about.
Hmm. And well, I would also like to ask you about, well, the layer of childhood drama and adolescence in Teenage Sweethearts, because, well, I believe
Yeah.
that the selfishness and the superficiality and egocentrism seems to be elevated in this song to the level of tyranny of empires, because, well, by calling the beautiful girl Neronia, and I believe it is derived from the name Nero, the Roman emperor who burned Rome, and as well cruel Caesarea. So,
Yeah.
from the perspective of 30 years, how do you now perceive this song, and who is
Well,
actually
I remember it.
Neronia?
Yeah, I remember it clearly. I was looking at this. She wasn't altogether beautiful, I must say. The girl, she was unique in many ways, and the way she pursued me was I'd never experienced it before, and the way she treated me, I just couldn't believe that someone could treat another human being like this girl treated me, and I reflected upon it, and that happened 10 years before I wrote this song. So when I eventually write the song, I'm still thinking about this, and I'm still looking for answers of why she would treat me so badly, and the impact it had upon me, and then how it impacted upon others. And and I just came to the conclusions that teenagers can be very, very harsh in the way they treat other people, and I was harsh because with Tracy Hitchens singing that part, that is not the part of the woman I'm speaking to in the first half of the song. She is the victim of she is another she is the victim of my own anger and my dealings with the first woman that I'm talking about in the first part of the song. And what happened, because what happened with the lyrics is that they changed the lyrics in the studio so that you don't get the transition from me, um, becoming the devil incarnate, dealing with this first teenage woman, young woman that I was dealing with, and then dealing with the victim of my own anger and the victim of I don't know, my own teenage narcissism, I guess. And Tracy sings it well, but she did change the lyrics a bit, which then prevents the listener from actually construing what I was actually trying to get at in regards to introducing a third party to the whole song. So it got really complicated, and we didn't record Tracy until I'd left. So she was brought in after I had recorded my bits of the song and left and gone back to Germany. And then Clive Nolan brought Tracy in, which was, a great thing because she had such a great voice. And yeah, so it kind of changed the meaning of the song a little bit, but there was three parties. This was a strange love triangle that I was trying to get across, and that the final, you know, party that comes into it, which is Tracy's bit, was the the innocent victim of the whole thing. So it was kind of complicated, I guess. Now going back to the whole um, idea of reducing the first woman or the first young woman that I was dealing with to Nero and Caesarea, is that she was just harsh. She was. Um, I'd never come across it, and I couldn't understand it. I understand it now because I've done a lot of research into childhood and childhood trauma and the impacts it has upon people. And this woman I was dealing with, she was a complete narcissist, or possible even um, sociopathic, or kind of personality disorder. Like, she didn't care about anybody. And I remember, and there's a lot of pop culture involved in this because I'd watched movies with Peter Ustinov as, a Roman emperor, and an Australian actor called Frank Thring, who was also um, in Hollywood in the 50s and portraying, these stereotypical Roman emperors who would look down at victims in the arena and just, give the thumbs down for somebody that would then be killed without any thought to the person. I brought that into it. Um, that was the thinking behind that whole thing, that she was dominant. She was I'd allowed this woman or this young woman to become dominant in my life to the extent where she was like this. She was controlling my emotions without any feeling whatsoever. And that's what came into my mind. It was those old Roman movies, all those movies from the 1950s where you saw, these really effeminate kind of Roman emperors deciding upon life and death in the arena. And that's where it came from. Peter Ustinov, Frank Thring. Yeah. And then it moves on from there because being treated like this results in you becoming someone that's not really a positive kind of personality. And I become in the song, in that Teenage Sweethearts, I realized that I'd become really evil too, and the devil incarnate. So and that's where I'm talking about in parts of that song where I am planning my revenge, and I have become almost Lucifer, the devil incarnate. And yeah, and that came from me reading Paradise Lost, and trying to understand the character of Satan and how he, after being thrown from heaven, he wants revenge upon God, and can only achieve that through his deception of Eve and then Adam and all that kind of stuff. So the song, when you think about what I was drawing from, it was a broad section of culture and pop culture that I'd been exposed to over a decade.
Thank you. And do you think that Neronia is some sort of archetype of a person that we all encounter at some point in our lives?
Yeah, Neronia, as you correctly kind of identified, is Nero and I kind of reduced that or converted that into a female form, that she was in my life at that particular time, and I was 17. She was all powerful, and she treated me badly, and I was traumatized by it, and then I went on to treat other people badly, and that is where Tracy Hitchings' character comes into it, and I'll call that character Kathy, and I treated her extremely badly, and I regretted it for a long time. And you can see that 10 years later, I'm still thinking about it and trying to make sense of it all. And that's what's happening. The song Teenage Sweethearts is kind of like an essay um, form, because I identify things that I can recognize, and then there's just questions and unanswered questions. And the song ends with kind of like a conclusion where I'm just saying, this is what I see, but there's still questions unanswered. And that's the teenagers' lot, is that they just do things that really on a whim, and you really can't make sense of anything of it. And that's what the song was about. But it was an essay. It was a focus on that period in my life where I'd experienced that. And on the one hand, I'm being treated badly, and on the other hand, I treat somebody else, a complete innocent, just as badly. So yeah, it was therapeutic. It was cathartic writing that song.
And you mentioned Tracy, and in her vocal passage, she sings, I admit in the beginning I couldn't get over you. Now I see the light,
Yeah,
something's rising through me. So does it mean that
yeah.
although traumatizing and sad, the childhood memories can be forgotten and it is simply possible to move on?
I guess that's what I was attempting to do by examining all this. I'd moved on. Like I was with a German girl. That's what brought me to Germany. But it still didn't make a lot of sense, and I still had so many questions, and not just of the behavior of this teenage girl that I'd been with, but my behavior and how I treated um, other people. And yeah, it was therapeutic, but and I must say, I'm with the second woman. I'm still friends with her. She never forgave me for treating her so badly, but I'm still friends with her. So yeah.
So you
But
think it
you know,
so you think it
sorry.
casts a shadow to some
Well, it
point.
did. I understand now because I had to deal with the German girl I was with, and she had major issues, and I couldn't really understand what was driving this woman. And I went and did my own research on that, and particularly into childhood trauma and the development of personality disorders. And you came to the conclusion eventually, and this is way after I'd written that song, that um, childhood trauma has a huge impact upon the person that develops out of that. And childhood is an extremely important period of your life. And I have, few doubts, and you can see it there in that song where I'm talking about the first woman's relationship with a mum, and that's true. I mean, I got criticised in the initial reviews by using cliched lyrics like "diamond rings," but she talked to me about this diamond ring her mother's buying her, and so all that was really true. And the Beatles talked about diamond rings. Dylan talked about diamond rings. So I thought I'd put that diamond ring thing in there because it indicated what this particular girl thought about what was important, and it was superficial, materialistic things. And this is what seemed to be important for teenagers, and it was for me. Um, you looked upon a girl if she was attractive, she was good. If she wasn't attractive, you had no interest in her. So it, I re-engaged in ideas such as that, the superficialities and materialistic ideas or views of the world when I was a teenager, and that's what I was grappling with that. But what I've learned now, and that song I sent you, that was, I think you've listened to it. You said. Um, and in that was then song, which is kind of different to the original UlySseS kind of music. But what I'm exploring there is just the impact that the past has on the present, and you look back at these simplistic times of childhood, and you long for it because things are simple, things are easily understood, and um, as you become an adult, life becomes complicated, and you're dealing with other people. And the middle part, the middle eight of that song, you can see I'm dealing with um, um, an adult relationship where the woman is just a complete narcissist or complete, um, what would you call a sociopath, which she really didn't. Um, I don't know, couldn't empathize or, uh, um, gee, she was a complete shocker. Couldn't empathize. There was no, she, she lacked the capacity to feel remorse. She was an antisocial personality individual, and that's what you see in the middle, where she knows the words, but she just can't comprehend the music. And yeah, so that's a pretty complex song, that one, I think. But childhood, I see from my research, is a really extremely important period of people's lives. And childhood trauma can go on to impact the development of the adult's personality, and to the detriment, really, ultimately, to themselves and anyone they really come across. So, yeah, I see childhood as and that's why I think I went back when I was trying to get the UlySseS blokes to start focusing on new music rather than redoing old stuff. was looking at something that was relevant to me at the time and looking at something that was important. And as far as prog is concerned, you can see, go back to, Marillion and the misplaced childhood, where they're looking at this. And when you're thinking about it, and I thought about misplaced childhood, what does that mean? Well, I understood it from my research in regards childhood is that it's a huge and very important part of the development of each individual. That sounds complicated, but it is.
And
And I can
thank you.
fully understand why it's such a focus in, progressive rock, in that when you're looking at individuals and what creates an individual, then you really got to go way back into their childhood to find out really what makes these people tick, because it's there that their adult personality has its foundations. Yeah.
And I would also like to go back to the very beginning of the album, to the Vagabond Child. And I would also
Yeah.
like to ask you whether there were any specific episodes in life that inspired and influenced the song, and what is the story behind the Vagabond Child?
Yeah, it is. I left home when I was 16. Believe it or not, I went back to later on and did my abitur, or HSC as they call it here in Australia, and then went back to university. But I was out living amongst all that um, when I was 16, and so a lot of that is autobiographical, I'd have to say. Um, and at the time, I was reading um, um, a book called The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, which was a strange book to be reading in Germany at this particular point in time, because um, it's a famous book, um, and it's by William Shirer, an American journalist that lived in Germany up until 1941, and he's writing about what he saw, and then he writes some autobiographical stuff on Hitler. And Hitler was out of home in Austria when he was a teenager, and I hate to say this, and it's really confronting, but I shared a lot of the experiences of being out of home and not in contact with your parents when you are a teenager. And so I started to think about that in my own experiences. And so, and where you can go from there. And again, those early kind of experiences you have when you're a young person can really impact upon where you end up as an adult. And I didn't go off and cause a world war or anything like that, and I dealt with things, but that's kind of autobiographical, yeah. And but what prompted me to look at that was the reading of that William L. Shirer's Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, and the teenage Hitler, living in Vienna, living in on the streets, and all sorts of things. And I mean, that's where the comparisons end. Of course, I didn't turn out to be a monster like he, but that's what focused me on that particular um, period of my life. And I've obviously, there's some things in there that aren't autobiographical that I put in there that I was never, I did kind of indulge with other things, and I did meet some pretty interesting and colourful people over the period of time, and that's all in there. And the same thing with my parents. My father died, and that's in there, and I'm dealing with my mum and the impact she had upon my life, and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, going back to the research, I said I had that I'd done before, my personal research into childhood and childhood trauma and the impacts upon that has upon um, the adult person. Um, yeah, I mean, it's all condoned. It's all, um, yeah. I I stand by it. That's what I experienced. That's what I've read. That's what I saw. And yeah, but that again is also in kind of essay form. So you can see I start off with an intro. I look at the issues throughout it, and then I end with a type of conclusion. And that's also reflective of where I was at. So I'd done a year of university. I moved to Germany, and I was in Germany, and I met the band, and my brief was to write the lyrics and come up with the melodies within the songs, and that's what I did.
And when it comes to the next track on the album, instead of a heavy atmosphere, the next track, The Sunday Rising, presents itself
Yeah,
as a sensual and defiant song to intimacy. And I believe the
yeah,
song captures a private moment between two lovers in a shaded chamber. The room is
yeah, indeed.
depicted as a sacred refuge, a place where the outside world ceases to exist. But Mr. Punctual, so the sun, pierces through the heavy drapes,
Yeah,
interrupts this
and it,
microcosmos. And I believe it references to
yeah,
John Donne's famous
yeah,
17th century metaphysical poem, The Sun Rising, with its symbolism and
abs-
romanticism. So, if my
absolutely.
interpretation is correct, what led you to John Donne for this track?
Yeah, it's spot on. I had a book, a Penguin book called Metaphysical Poets, and I'd done um I'd done John Donne in my HSC, and so I was intrigued by that poem, and the fact that John Donne was also a clergyman, um, and I loved John Donne, and so that particular poem resonated with me, and when I've listened to this piano part of the song, it inspired me to go back to the Sunday Rising, and yeah, and you know, um, what would you say? Derive things from that poem. That's what it's all about. That's exactly what it's about. And everything in the later part of it, and you can tell that I've written a like 10 lines or something, and I'm repeating it throughout the entire thing because I really didn't see that I could bring up anything more than my interpretation of the poem. And that last bit where I talk about bringing me another Sunday, I'd written that song before I'd met the band. That part, that kind of, I don't know if it's a chorus or it's a coda, but that was in my head long before I met the band. And then bringing me another Sunday, it was quite interesting because then I got to the end of the song, and I'm looking for ideas of how to kind of fit a melody into the particular piece of music. And then I thought, gee, that's almost the same time as that bringing me another Sunday song I, I wrote years ago, and I brought that out, and it fitted in. It fitted in perfectly. And then the last part of the song, I basically improvise in the studio, and I think that's almost one of the best parts of the song, that improv part at the end. Um, and I notice on Facebook that's the most streamed song on the album. I think it's over 4,000 odd streams. Um, and I liked the song. That song was written by Thomas Deal, the keyboard player. Um, and I sent him that song that was then, and he said to me he didn't mind the song, but he didn't like ballads all that much. And I then reminded him that he had written the music to Sunday Rising before I'd put the lyrics to it. Yeah, he didn't respond to that. But
And yes, can this song perhaps mean that the troubles of childhood and turmoils of childhood and adolescence, it is possible to find refuge in another person or in intimacy and somehow survive
oh
those hard years of growing up?
yeah, I don't think I could relate that to childhood. That is me, um, interpreting John Donne's poem with my wife at the time. I was married to a German woman for about 29 years. We were living together, and we we enjoyed each other's company a lot, and we spent lots of time in bed on the weekends. And that really is what the song's about. And I've combined that with my interpretation of the John Donne poem Sunday Rising. I mean, the other apart from that, the other thing or connection with teenage um, part of my life was the final song, Freedom Will Be Mine. That's all about it. My rejection of Catholicism that had been basically forced down my throat by my parents, and I thought it was a horrible thing. I thought, and I've been condoned by what's been revealed by the Australian legal system, in that the Catholic Church was found to be the propagator of child sex crimes, and it had nothing. I'm not that I don't know if I'm a victim of that, but I rejected it. I rejected the whole thing, and that's what that entire song's about. It's there's a lot of analogy in there about breaking free from what had been basically forced upon me as a young person, and then breaking free, and it's all about that. That was one of the biggest things in my life, and I guess I don't know what your connection with Catholicism is, but in the Irish Catholic community in Australia, it was a big thing, and I rejected it, and that's what that whole song's about: me rejecting Catholicism, which had been forced upon me, and I rejected it. I know clearly I rejected it when I was about 16, when I moved out of home, and I just thought, that's it. I'm not doing this anymore, and that's what that whole song is about. Me basically gaining agency over my life and getting church out of my life, and freedom will be mine, and that's what it's about. The whole thing. If you go from go to woe, and it gets into that analogous kind of situations where I'm interpreting the my situation into the song as a story of escape. Well, that's exactly what it was, and I did it as a teenager. I rejected Catholicism as a teenager, and intellectually rejected it, and eventually my rejection was condoned. It was I was on the right side of history in that regard, and so that song, as you can see, it was 30 minutes long or whatever it is. I spent a lot of time on that, and there's lots of analogies, there's lots of metaphors in there, but it's all about me escaping that religious kind of yoke that my parents had put upon me without me having any kind of input into that at all. And as soon as I was able to gain understanding of what it was all about, I rejected it and I sought freedom from it. And that all came up, and I was really pleased with some of the parts of that song, I must say.
Which is also a
Particularly
part
the
of
horse bit.
which is also the part of
I
growing
like,
up. I mean, the defiance, and that should at least characterize the process of adolescence and growing up.
yeah, yeah. So you're then challenging the ideas that your parents are forced upon you. Yeah, so it's a typical kind of teenage story where I'm rejecting it and I'm fighting and I'm running away and I'm seeking freedom from it. And that's what that whole song's about. And um, it's a very long song, and some of the bits in it I'm not that I wasn't that pleased with. I think I could have done better, particularly the opening bits where I follow the melody of the music rather than creating the own kind of you know, standalone melody. But the lyrics are all there. I labored over those lyrics, and they're all um, they're all lyrics I was happy with. There's some of those songs on that album, I finished on the plane from Munich to London because I was never pleased with what I'd written. And but Freedom Will Be Mine, the final one, I labored over those, and they were exactly how I wanted them to be. And that was my teenage battle against, the religion, the dogma of the Catholic Church that my parents had forced upon me. Yeah.
And I have a question regarding the next song, so Where the River Runs, which is, according to the information given at the Bandcamp page of yours, the last piece of music written for the album. And you finished the lyrics on the flight to the studio in London. And what's very interesting about the song that it refers to the initial idea for a name of the album, so Labyrinths and Pyramids. And moreover, I believe the song reflects upon how unconditional love and teenage love can be, as the lyrical ego or the narrator in the song says that he cannot offer his lover labyrinths in Egypt and pyramids in Mars, which I reckon symbolizes that the only thing that he can truly offer is his love. And could you tell me more about this song, whether my interpretation is correct, and what do those labyrinths in Egypt and pyramids on Mars symbolize?
I can tell you that comes from exactly. I was in Munich at the time, and I had the music. So all I had was the music. So you can hear that song without the vocal and the vocal melody. And I was walking around my Walkman, and we at that time we had lots of people come to Munich from the former Yugoslavia, and it was a very dire situation. And I was a Bademeister, I was a lifeguard, and I worked with people from Bosnia, Herzegovina, and they were telling me about what they'd experienced, and it was just horrific. And I come from a town where there's a river running through it. And this girl I was working with, she was telling me also about her town in Bosnia, and how a river ran through it, and that became the river where the river runs. And um and um I looked at I thought a lot about that. It had a profound impact upon me about people, you know, growing up in a particular place, and that place being put in peril or destroyed, and they're then displaced. So, lots of Bosnians and Croatians came to Munich, and they would prefer to be back where they grew up, where the river runs. And it didn't matter what you said to them, they were unhappy. It was all about that unhappiness about being displaced. And I just came up with those things. Pyramids on Mars is from, I don't know if you're familiar with the BBC series called Doctor Who. Yeah, well, there was a whole um, episode, or a couple of episodes, called Pyramids on Mars, and Labyrinths in Egypt. Came from the fact that I don't think there are any labyrinths in Egypt, but there were pyramids. And so I was kind of playing around with that labyrinths really came from Greek culture rather than Egyptian culture. but then I was talking about pyramids on Mars, which came from Doctor Who and the whole thing, and ultimately they weren't real, and they were a fantasy, and there was something that was unattainable or untrue, and it was just something that you couldn't offer someone because it wasn't real. And what was real in that song was the place where the river ran.
Okay, and the album Neronia also includes a song which is purely instrumental, and it's called Mistinguett. Jean Bourgeois, known professionally as Mistinguett, was a French actress and a singer at the turn of 19th and 20th centuries, who was at the time the highest paid female entertainer in the world. And could you elaborate further why you chose to name the instrumental piece in the album after her, and what is her connection to childhood and adolescence?
Well, yeah, well, I didn't name the song. That was, to my knowledge, that was Thomas Deal, who came up with that song. And I'd never heard it. To be quite honest with you, I'd never heard it. And then I turned up in at Thin Ice Studios, um, Clive Nolan's studios, and there was this new song called Mistinguett, and they were trying to record it, and they had lots of problems with it, and I I I I remember saying in jest that they should call it Mistakewit because they kept making mistakes every time we tried to record it. So I had nothing to do with Mistinguett. That was, to my knowledge, that was all Thomas Deal's um, baby. And yeah, I didn't have anything to do with that whatsoever.
All right, thank you. And I'd like to ask you about Days Gone By, because I think there is a connection to Where the River Runs. Days Gone By is the only song on the album whose lyrics weren't written by you, but by Robert Zoom. In the song, the lyrical ego or the narrator is talking about rejection and confusion. It is telling the tale of a relationship falling apart and actually going nowhere. The days go by, time is slipping through fingers, and yet there is no solution for the troubles, it seems. So, what is the meaning behind the
Yeah.
lyrics? Are the rejection and confusion parts of
Well,
growing up and parts in being in love as a teenager, perhaps?
well, yeah. Well, that's a song we worked at in the rehearsal studio for some time. I remember finding it difficult to do the lyric, some of the melody in the middle of the song, but I worked on it because I had the Walkman. I was using that all the time because I was living in Munich and the band was in Wiesbaden or Frankfurt. Um, but that was all Robert Zoom's idea, and I thought that it was more or less a adult relationship he was talking about, and I really worked on recording it to the best I could, and I thought we did. Although I still think that there's parts of the song that could have been done better. That transition from um, the I guess what would it be, the verse into um, that keyboard solo. I thought that could have been done better. I thought there needed to be some more drum fills in there or something or other. But look, it had some melodies in it, but the melodies came from Robert mostly, and I added a little bit of lyric in there somewhere along the way, but mostly that was Robert Zoom's song. And I must say, I didn't know who Robert Zoom was until I until I got there, and it turned out to be Bant, the drummer. He changed his name, and he came up, with this song a couple of months before. But I wanted my favorite song was called Soul Creation, which is on the 2023 edition of the album, where they added the demos, and that didn't make it onto the cut. That didn't make it, onto the album, and that was my favorite song that we were doing, and that was the first song I wrote for the band, called Soul Creation. But anyway, those are them's are the breaks, I guess. It was great, and we worked on that Robert Zoom's song for quite a bit, and in the end, he was happy with the way I sang it, and as I said, there's bits in it that I really really like. But there you go. But I thought it was more or less an adult relationship rather than a childhood thing. But he'd be able to tell you more about that than I can.
And Forever Lost is the second to last song of the album, and it starts with a mesmerizing guitar passage, and the lyrics believe balance between Memento Mori and Carpe Diem. And what I mean by that is that the song begins and ends with a vision of the future, specifically the end of life. And the imaginary used in the first two stanzas paints a picture of absolute finality. On the other hand, the realization of death becomes the catalyst for action, so the narrator wants to extract every drop of life from the current moment. And could you elaborate further on the subject, and what does Forever Lost mean in the context of the album?
That's just about it. That we need to. The idea was that we don't have much time, and that we need to act upon our feelings in the here and now immediately, because we don't know what will happen. And the whole concept of time came from a poem by an Australian poet called Slessor. I don't know if it's Thomas Slessor, but he wrote a poem called 12 bells or something like that, 10 bells, 7 bells, and it was about what could be achieved within these bells. And so the bells, maybe it was 12 bells, where the bells would chime, that indicates an hour, and the hour is gone, and that hour will never be experienced again. And so the whole concept I felt that was that you had to make the most of those minutes and those hours and those seconds, those minutes and those hours, because they'll be gone. We'll never have them back again, or be lost. And that's what the whole song's about. The urgency of experiencing, what's important between two people, and I still feel that to this day. And it's I thought it was a great song, and that's what the song's about. So Thomas Slessor, I think the poet's name may be, and 12 bells was the poem that I got it from, and it was all that idea of time and the impact time has upon people, and the loss of time, and how time is such an important thing to people that feel greatly about each other. And you shouldn't waste the time. You should act upon your impulses and the way you feel, and it should be immediate. Otherwise, it could be lost forever. And that's what the song was about. And it was a great guitar bit by I think he had an electric semi-acoustic Yamaha that he was playing at the time. And he came around to my place and played it for me, and I said, "Yeah, we need to record it so that I can then deal with the you know, I can listen to the song and come up with melodies, and that's what I did. I basically listened to it, and that whole concept of heartbeat, as in a heartbeat, is also a timed kind of variable in the whole thing. And you can hear Ender, the bass player, his bass playing then kind of simulates the heartbeat, that ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum. And yeah, I thought possibly it could have been better if we'd spent more time on it. Tracy singing in it was sensational. She was such a fantastic singer. And yeah, I never met Tracy. She was brought in after the production, after I'd finished recording in the studio and I'd left, and she was brought in, and she does it in that song, really lift it and take it to a different level. But that's what that song's all about. It's about two people that feel so much for each other, and they should act upon it and not leave it until time's run out and there's no time to experience what they really feel. But look, I remember these quite well, because I was a lot of the time I was by myself, and Anke, my ex-wife, a Lufthansa stewardess, she was away for 2 weeks on end sometimes, and I was there by myself with these songs, thinking about them, and this is where it all came from. And I had my books there, so I had Slessor, and I was reading poetry and all kinds of books. I read so many books at that particular point in time, but that's what all that is about, that idea of time and how precious it is. Yeah.
Thank you. And I would like to ask you one specific question, because on the last page of the booklet, right under the photo of yours, there's a statement. I quote, "Tell me, Muse, stories of the men and women of this world. Tell me, O goddess of song, of their cities and ways, and of the deities and sufferings they must endure as they wander far and wide through the narrowed halls of their doomed lives. Tell us, O goddess, daughter of Zeus, beginning at whatever point you will." And I would like to ask you what you meant by that, and do you refer to Neronia in that paragraph, and could you elaborate further on this?
Yeah. No, that comes from Homer. So at the beginning of the Iliad and the Odyssey, and you remember that the Odyssey, you know, based on the story and life of Odysseus, or his trip back to Ithaca from the Trojan War, it takes him 10 years. So he's been away for 20 years. And the name of the band was UlySseS, which is the Latinized version of Odysseus. And so I thought there was this connection there with the Greek epics. And so at the beginning of the Iliad, and the beginning of the Odyssey, Homer asks the Muse to inspire him to write songs, or, you know, poem, the experiences of men. That's where it comes from.
Okay, thank
It's as
you.
simple as that. I mean, I changed it a bit, and if you go back and have a look at the beginnings of the Iliad and the Odyssey, this is how epic poems start. You ask the Muse for inspiration, and that's basically what it is. And so the guys wanted something written for the album, and so I just wrote that. And I had a lot to do in that period. I'd read the Iliad, I read the Odyssey, I'd read a book by Nietzsche on where he compares what does he compare? It's to do with the end of tragedy, or the death of tragedy, where he compares what is it, Apollo with Dionysus, and he was a big fan of Richard Wagner, and that was really inspiring. And I I read that book, and I went and then and read the Iliad, and I read the Odyssey, and when the guys something, a couple of words for the booklet, I thought I'd take it from those books, which I did at uni, I did at university, and they were really inspiring for me. And yeah, I mongrelized it, I guess, a bit, but that's what it is. And that's at the beginning of both those, epic poems where the poet asks the muse for inspiration, and that's what it is.
And do you think you referred to Neronia in that paragraph? Could she be the muse?
No, no. Neronia was not a very nice person. And I thought I made that pretty clear. When I was thinking of Neronia, Nero, and I'm thinking of those 50s movies where I saw as a little kid, Frank Thring and Peter Ustinov, these effeminate, horrible people giving the thumbs down, and people being killed at the whim of this person. Um, yeah, that had a lot to do with the horrible young woman that I had to deal with in Teenage Sweethearts, but nothing to do with the Muse. The Muse was unknown to me. I've had a lot of muses since that I know exactly who they are, but that particular muse that was leading me around through you know, um, all those songs that were written for Neronia. I don't know who she was, but definitely wasn't my ex-wife. There's there is no song on that album that has anything to do with my ex-wife. It's funny. I didn't realize at the time that I wasn't being inspired by the woman I was with. I was being inspired by um, these young women who, uh, particularly in Teenage Sweethearts, who had treated me badly, or who I had treated badly. And yeah, so it's rather funny when I look at it, because I've written a lot of songs since about my ex-wife. They're not very complimentary, but nothing on that album. It was all retrospective. It was all dealing with books I'd read at the time or previously, things I'd done during my final year at school, like John Donne, relationships that I'd had years before that ended badly, and I really hadn't come to terms with them, or I didn't understand why they ended, or why people treated each other the way they had. And I was, just looking for answers, I guess, which is a pretty human kind of thing to do, because I didn't know. I guess I still don't know a lot of it. But then again, yeah, it was a great period of my life, I must say, when I'm thinking I'm being given these pieces of music, and I'm being told to go and write lyrics to and find melodies for them, and that's what I did. And I walked around Offenbach. I walked up and down the main river. I travelled on Straßenbahn and S-Bahn and U-Bahn to get to rehearsal studios, and all the while I had my Walkman, and I'm listening to this music all the time, trying to find inspiration and trying to finish these songs. And yeah, it was a great period, and you know, I I I loved that period of my life, and it was great that it ultimately, we were able to record it onto the CD, and somebody decided that Neronia was a great name to pull out of the lyrics of a song, and create the title to the album. And again, I had no say in that. Thomas Deal, I think, decided that, um, and he was a great guy. He was a good manager and a good leader. Yeah.
Thank you. And I would also like to ask you one question about the visual side of the album, because, since we have already discussed the lyrics. And on a personal note, I need to say that Neronia's cover art done by Friedhelm Kütter and inspired by Ernst Weil is one of the most memorable and finest progressive rock artworks I have ever seen. And I believe it perfectly captures the mood of the album. In my opinion, the style of the cover art reminds of innocent children's drawings. And could you tell me more about how the artwork of the album came to be? And was it purely
Well,
Friedhelm's idea, or did you influence him somehow?
no, I didn't influence that at all. Um, I I had given them my ideas, which was a a pyramid turned on its side with labyrinths in the bottom of it. So it was turned, fallen over on its side, and underneath you could see all these labyrinths in there. And I wanted to call the album Labyrinths and Pyramids, and we were running with that until we discovered that Clive Nolan's band were calling their album Labyrinths or something, and it was going to be too confusing. And then, to my knowledge, at least, Thomas Deal found this artist who created this image, and it was kind of reflective of a concept of Neronia, which went from being a person in the song to being a place on the album cover. I think that's how you interpret it when you look at it, Neronia, and you see that image, that artwork. You think that this is a place called Neronia. For actual fact, Neronia is a person within the song.
I've
Yeah.
got one last ultimate question about Neronia. And how do you think it resonates in the current world in 2026? Do you think the topics and themes it references to are still relevant? And how do you see it now? What changed between 1993 and 2026?
I honestly don't think much has changed. If you go through each one of the songs, if you look at Vagabond, Child Well, there's still those around. John Donne, Sunday Rising, it resonates throughout the ages. I mean, I was there reading it in 1988, right through to 1993 when I wrote that song. So it was around for what 400 years or whatever. So I think that's pretty relevant. Teenage Sweethearts, well, gee, there's still teenagers out there and they're still treating each other badly. So that's pretty much on it. Um, where do we go from there? Where the river runs, well, it's about refugees. It's about displaced people yearning to be back where they once belonged, and that being a complete fantasy. And so that's still with us. If you look at the number of refugees in the world, um, gee, where does that take me to? The lovers in Forever Lost. Um, yeah, that's an eternal kind of a situation you're dealing with. And then you go on to Days Gone By. Well, again, that's something to do with relationships and misunderstandings within them. And gee, that's always going to happen. I don't know how many relationships I've had, but communication is always a problem. And that's what I think that song's all about. And then eventually, Freedom Will Be Mine is, as I said to you, a song where, a young person rejects the religion or the dogma within that religion of their parents, and has to go through, a trauma-filled process of eliminating that and being free from it. That's what Freedom Will Be Mine is all about. And it was quite funny that, we were trying to figure out what the name of the song was going to be. And in the end, I think Freedom Will Be Mine is the last line of the song. And so that was apt, because that's what it's all about. Pursuing um, something, or rejecting something you don't believe in, and then pursuing, I guess, some abstract thing that's ultimately going to be the alternative of what you're rejecting. And you don't know. because you're up there on Red Hill looking out at the harbour and not knowing what's going to happen. And all of a sudden, Milko Rudnik sort of comes in with his big lead solo at the end, which, it was great. I heard that solo. I mean, I think it's reminiscent of Comfortably Numb. It's very similar if you listen to it, but it's a great solo, and it really set off the whole thing, and it's a great way to end the entire album. And I felt well pleased, and I still listen to it. I listened to it more in preparation for this interview, but I'm at ease with it. I can live with it. It was great to do. It was a fantastic part of my life.
Thank you very much, and I believe these are all the questions that I have prepared for you. And thank you very much from the bottom of my heart for all the insights and for the wonderful work of yours. And it's been truly a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, thanks, Krzysztof. No, it's been great, and thanks for your interest, and all the best for the success of what you're going to do.
Thank you. Thank you.